Okay, firstly, an apology. I am about to expose you to Nigel Farage, but I am going to take apart everything he says comprehensively. Sounds a bit arrogant, but we're shooting fish in a barrel here. So, the census and its revelations that Britain is a minority Christian country, it's no longer a majority Christian country, and urban centres have become diverse, more diverse. They were already diverse. That's what the census revealed. That has caused distress and alarm to the likes of Nigel Farage, not just him. We'll talk about, for example, Douglas Murray and Andrew Pearce as well. Now, brace yourself. It's only a short clip, but you need to hear it so I can tell you exactly why everything is wrong, and more importantly, because this is more important than Farage, why this matters.
The Office of National Statistics figures are out today showing that London, Birmingham and Manchester are all now minority white cities. Massive demographic changes taking place in our country. More significantly for the country as a whole, it shows that only 46% now identify as Christian. So there is a massive change in the identity of this country that is taking place through immigration. You may think it's a good thing, you may think it's a bad thing, but here's the real point of this. The ONS now say in future they will not ask of the nationality or birthplace of those taking part in this census. 1 in 6 in England and Wales already born outside the UK. In future, they want to hide the true figures from you. That's the real standout from these numbers today. It's a scandal.
Yeah, okay, so a few things here, Nige. The reason Christianity's collapsed in England and Wales isn't because of immigration. It's actually quite the opposite. It's overwhelmingly British-born people, mostly white people, obviously, statistically, because the vast majority of people born in Britain are white. They've abandoned religion en masse. There's really very little you can do about that. People just aren't as religious as they used to be. Now, in fact, the decline would be even steeper if it wasn't for migrants. Because what's happened is the number of people born in Britain, they've abandoned Christianity, but you've had a number of people born in other countries who are Christian coming into Britain at the same time. So that's actually inflating the numbers of Christians. So rather than immigration being responsible for the decline of Christianity in Britain, it's actually preventing the fall of Christianity being quite as steep as it already would be. So if you are defining Christianity as a crucial plank of British identity, then you have immigration to thank for coming to the rescue of it. Well, not to the rescue of it, because as the figures show, Christianity is not doing very well in this country. It's becoming one of the most irreligious countries on earth. Heathens, I tell you. Now, it's also not true about what he says about London or Manchester. It's completely untrue. He's got his facts completely wrong. London is not a minority city. What he's done is conflate white British, so that's how 37% of Londoners identify, and white. But there are other people who are white who just don't define themselves as white British. So 54% of Londoners are actually white. The same goes for Manchester. The Office for National Statistics has actually put out a statement refuting this nonsense. 56.8% of Mancunians, according to the latest census, identify as white. But you know what? Even if it were true, who cares? What's the issue here? Why does it matter? I mean, let's just see what right-wing commentator Douglas Murray, who writes for The Spectator, many other publications, often on broadcast television, is tweeted out. I see many commentators on the census results saying, so what if people who identify as white British are a minority in London, Birmingham, Leicester, Manchester, etc.? I mean, we've already established that's bollocks. Just one answer to which is because we never voted for this, quite the opposite, in fact. I don't remember the vote on this. I don't remember the vote in limiting the non-white population of Britain. I'd be pretty sure I'd remember that. I'd be quite alarmed by it for a start. Let's just give Murray the right reply here. When challenged by Larry the Cat, it is Twitter, these things happen, asking him when the UK electorate voted for the whiteness of the population to increase, Murray responded, no, just that for decades every party that wanted power promised to bring net migration down, and every time they lied or otherwise failed to do so. Quite simple, really. No need to put your own racist spin on it. It's a cat, Douglas. They definitely didn't, let's just be clear, the politicians of this country, who I think we can condemn for many things, including often racist and xenophobic rhetoric, actually. But they definitely didn't phrase their election promises as limiting the non-white population of major cities. That didn't happen. And actually, if you'd accuse them of that, they would probably get quite angry about it. The problem is, as well, with Murray, let's just be clear about what he's previously said. He once wrote, London has become a foreign country. In 23 of London's 33 boroughs, white Britons are now in a minority. Hold on, what does that mean? London's become a foreign country because non-whites are a minority. Now, can someone explain what other interpretation there is here, other than those who aren't white British are foreigners? I mean, what else is there to understand from that statement? I'm open-minded. Please leave other suggested interpretations in the comments. Because Douglas, Dougie boy, being British is not contingent. It's not dependent on the colour of your skin. A black Briton is as British as you or I. Well, I mean, I say that. I mean, Douglas Murray actually lives in New York, by the way. He lives in New York. It's one of the most diverse cities probably in the Western world. I mean, I don't want to get all like turning the tables here, but if you don't like it, leave it. I think, as the right often say. Why do you choose to live in such diverse cities? These right wingers. Why don't they go and live in Alabama, Douglas? Go and live in Utah. I mean, if that's your problem, maybe you'll claim you don't have a problem. I'd love to know. Fascinating stuff. Let's move on to Andrew Pearce of the Daily Mail, GB News, frequently on other TV channels. He declared, and I quote, if a party leader pledged 25 years ago major cities such as Birmingham and London would have minority white populations, they would have lost the general election. I beg your pardon, Andy, what? I mean, the National Front did stand under a slogan, Keep Britain White. They lost the election every time they stood, actually. Maybe you missed that little fact. The truth is, actually, the population of England and Wales remains overwhelmingly white, stubbornly so, actually, 82% white. So that's more than 8 out of 10 people living in England and Wales are white, compared to 86% 10 years ago, the last census, 2011. Asian groups now make up 9%, black people 4%, mixed race people 3%. Now, it is true that Britain's minorities tend to be concentrated in certain urban areas and specific towns in urban conurbations, leaving vast swathes of the country looking almost completely white. If you drive around many towns in England and Wales, you don't see many faces who aren't white. Now, it is very likely, obviously, London will become a majority-minority city in the not-too-distant future. And in a very, very long time in the future, on the current trends, it's perfectly conceivable that Britain will not be a majority white country anymore. Now, try to explain clearly and succinctly, if you are white, what legitimate problem you have with this. What is the issue? Why would it matter? What are you attaching to the colour of your skin exactly? Do you believe it's a threat to what you regard as being British or British identity? And if so, what about British identity is attached to the whiteness of your skin? Do you think that history and culture are embedded in your DNA? Do you think that if a microscope looked deep at the cellular data, that within your cellular walls, there would be that history and culture and identity? Well, it's a nonsense, obviously. I do wonder if a lot of fear that exists amongst certain whites at the idea that they won't be a majority is a tacit understanding and recognition that minorities in Britain do suffer structural disadvantages and indeed oppression. From, I don't know, being more likely to be poor, discriminated against at work, more likely to be harassed by the police and persecuted by the justice system. And they worry that if whites become a minority, maybe those tables will be turned and they'll be subjected to the same treatment. Well, that actually isn't how it works, incidentally, because the racism directed at minorities in Britain has its roots in historical phenomena going back centuries, like the slave trade, like colonialism, which was justified. They had to justify and rationalise the violent oppression, the horrors they inflicted on fellow human beings by imprinting them as inferior. And that is the heritage we need to throw off. The US, slavery in the US was only overthrown 2 lifetimes ago. It's not that long. So obviously you can't understand the racism of today without that history. Now, the other thing is, whatever you think about British identity, Firstly, it's completely different for all of us. I mean, sure, I have a baffling attachment, like lots of English people, to tea and the queuing system, but I guess that's part of it. But how I see Britishness and how Nigel Farage sees Britishness are completely different to white Britons, if you like. We both, I presume, put white British on our census forms. There are things about Britain I venerate, like the National Health Service, multiculturalism, the queer scene, I don't know, trade unions and workers fighting back, which I heavily doubt Farage does. But I see that as part of a Britishness that I am fond and proud of, as it turns out. There's also a history I'm proud of, like, I don't know, going back to the levellers and the diggers of the English Revolution, going back to the Chartists, going back to the trade unions, the suffragettes, the LGBTQ people, the anti-racism activists, those who fought oppression and injustice, those who were spat at in the streets, battened by police officers, thrown into dirty cells, force-fed in the case of the suffragette, people who were tortured, people who were murdered. Those are the shoulders, the giants on whose shoulders we stand. But I don't think Nigel Farage quite looks at that British history quite the same way. I bet the things he's proud of in that Britain are very different from me. And do you know what? In a century's time, Britain will look unrecognisably different. Of course it will. Look at Britain a century ago. If you went, as I think it was Lord Astor said, the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. Yes, they did. If you went round Britain 100 years ago, they spoke differently, just at the very start, just at the outset. It would have culturally been completely different. The things they valued, the way they looked at the world, completely different. The way you'd be treated as a woman, far even worse, because unfortunately structural sexism and misogyny still very much part of our society. Good luck if you're gay. Again, the grinding poverty and exploitation that many workers suffered, they still do today. But what was seen as acceptable then, even more acute, things will be completely different. But why do you fear your whiteness being impinged upon? Why do you fear being part of a minority, which you won't actually in your lifetime? You won't have that experience unless the demographics completely rapidly change in the course of the next decades, which, looking at the trend, they won't. What are you really fearing? There isn't actually a legitimate grievance at all, and that's the issue. So, that's my response to the likes of Farage, Murray and Pearce. We should embrace our diversity and multiculturalism, because I'd much rather live in a diverse country with people from different backgrounds and experiences than have to keep cohabiting with those who peddle this right-wing paranoia with all the damage and harm that inflicts. Please like, subscribe. I'll see you next time.